I want to speak today about a moment that does not belong to politics, power, uniforms, or speeches, but a moment that belongs to every human soul. A moment that no army can stop, no wealth can delay, and no leader can escape, and that moment is Qiyamah, the day of judgment. Because no matter how high you rise in this world, no matter how loudly crowds chant your name, there will come a day when your name will be called alone, and you will stand without guards, without titles, without flags, without applause, standing only as a servant before the one who created you. And when I reflect on Qiyamah, I do not feel fear alone. I feel responsibility, because leadership in Islam is not a crown of gold. It is a weight on the soul, it is a trust and amana. And on that day, every decision I made, every silence I chose, every injustice I stopped or failed to stop will speak louder than any speech I ever gave in this world. And this is why the room goes silent when Qiyamah is mentioned, because deep down, every heart knows the truth, that no power lasts forever, that no throne follows you into the grave, and that the earth we walk on will one day testify either for us or against us. And when I read and reflect on the Islamic understanding of the Day of Judgment, I see not just fear but perfect justice, justice so complete that even a whisper of wrongdoing will not be lost, and even a grain of sincere goodness will not be ignored. And this understanding humbles me as a leader, because Islam teaches that leadership is service, not domination, accountability, not privilege, and mercy, not arrogance. And on Qiyamah, there will be no excuses that say I was too busy, or the system was difficult, or the world forced me. Because the questions will be clear. Did you protect the weak? Did you speak truth when lies were easier? Did you rule with justice when oppression brought comfort? And did you remember Allah when power tried to make you forget Him? And this is why silence falls in the room when Qiyamah is mentioned, because it strips every human being to their core, reminding us that history books may lie, media may distort, and people may forget. But Allah never forgets, and nothing is hidden from Him, not the tears of the oppressed, not the hunger of the poor, not the intentions buried in the heart. And when I imagine standing on that day, I do not imagine microphones or cameras. I imagine questions, and not many, but deep ones, questions that go straight through the soul, asking not how strong was your army, but how soft was your heart, not how feared were you, but how fair were you, not how loud were your speeches, but how sincere were your actions. And Islam reminds us that leaders will be questioned more severely because they had more power to change things, more ability to stop injustice, and more responsibility to act. And this knowledge does not weaken me. It strengthens me, because it reminds me that real success is not measured by years in office, but by standing firm on truth, even when it costs you popularity, even when it brings criticism, even when it makes enemies. Because on Qiyamah, those enemies may stand silent while your intentions speak for you. And this is why the mention of the Day of Judgment creates silence, because it cuts through ego, it humbles the proud, it awakens the sleeping conscience, and it reminds every leader that this world is a test, not a reward, a responsibility, not a destination. And Islam teaches us that justice delayed in this world is not justice denied, because the final court is unavoidable, and there the oppressed will stand tall, while tyrants will wish they could return for one moment to make things right. And I say this not as someone claiming perfection, but as someone who knows that leadership without accountability to Allah becomes corruption, and power without fear of Qiyamah becomes destruction. And when people say the room went silent, it is because truth entered the space, a truth older than nations, and stronger than weapons, the truth that every soul shall taste death, and every soul shall answer for what it earned. And if this reminder makes people uncomfortable, then it is doing its job, because comfort is not the purpose of reminders. Awakening is, and I believe that a leader who remembers Qiyamah will never sleep peacefully while injustice exists, will never speak proudly while people suffer, and will never forget that every breath is borrowed, every position is temporary, and every soul is returning. And when that day comes, I pray not for excuses but for acceptance, not for praise, but for mercy, and not for titles, but for forgiveness, because in the end, the greatest victory is not ruling the world for a moment, but standing before Allah with a heart that tried to rule itself with justice, humility, and faith. And when I continue to think about Qiyamah, I realize that the silence it creates is not empty, it is full of truth, full of reminders, full of the weight that every soul carries whether it admits it or not. Because deep inside, every human being knows that this world is not the end, it is only a passage. And leadership in this passage is the most dangerous test of all, because power has a way of convincing you that you are permanent when you are temporary, that you are untouchable when you are accountable. And Islam does not allow a leader this illusion. Islam breaks it, shatters it, and replaces it with awareness of Allah, awareness of the grave, awareness of the day when even the strongest voice will tremble. And when I speak of Qiyamah, I speak of that day when excuses dissolve, when intentions rise to the surface, when the smallest injustice becomes heavier than mountains, and when the smallest sincere act becomes brighter than the sun. And this understanding changes how a leader breathes, how he walks, how he decides. Because suddenly power is no longer a privilege. It becomes a responsibility that keeps you awake at night, asking yourself, not did they praise me, but did Allah accept me? Not did I win, but was I just? Not did I survive politics, but did I protect the dignity of those who had no voice? And this is why Qiyamah is not a topic for sermons alone. It is a compass for leadership. Because when a leader remembers that one day he will stand alone before Allah, he stops stealing from the future. He stops sacrificing truth for convenience. He stops using people as tools, and he begins to see every decision as a testimony that will speak on his behalf or against him. And Islam teaches us that even silence can be a sin if it protects injustice, that even delay can be a crime if it allows oppression to grow. And these are heavy lessons, but they are necessary ones, because without them, power becomes poison, and nations bleed slowly while leaders smile comfortably. And when the room goes silent at the mention of Qiyamah, it is because every soul recognizes that moment when Allah will ask not about intentions spoken publicly, but about intentions hidden privately, not about promises announced, but about promises broken, not about enemies defeated, but about trust honored. And I know that on that day no flag will shade me, no supporters will defend me, no speeches will impress anyone, because the only currency accepted will be truth, justice, patience, and sincerity. And this awareness does not paralyze me, sharpens me. It reminds me that fear of Allah is not weakness. It is the strongest shield a leader can carry, because a leader who fears Allah will never fear losing power if power requires betrayal, will never fear criticism if silence requires injustice, and will never fear standing alone if standing together requires compromise of truth. And Islam reminds us again and again that this life is short even if it feels long, that authority is brief even if it feels absolute, and that the grave does not ask who followed you, it asks who you followed. And when I imagine Qiyamah, I imagine the oppressed finally standing without chains, without fear, without tears. And I imagine the powerful standing stripped of titles, stripped of confidence, stripped of excuses. And this image is not meant to terrify, it is meant to correct. Because fear that leads to justice is mercy, and remembrance that leads to humility is guidance. And this is why I say that mentioning Qiyamah is not pessimism, it is realism. It is the ultimate reminder that success without accountability is failure, that victory without justice is defeat, and that leadership without remembrance of Allah is a test already failed. And if my words cause silence, then let that silence be productive. Let it be the silence where hearts reflect, consciences awaken, and intentions realign. Because the loudest revolutions begin not with shouting, but with truth settling deeply inside the soul. And on that day when all noise ends forever, I pray not to be remembered as a powerful man, but as a responsible one, not as a fearless leader, but as a God-fearing one, and not as someone who ruled over people, but as someone who remembered that he himself was ruled by Allah, and answered that rule with justice, humility, and sincere effort until the very end. And as these thoughts deepen within me, I understand that Qiyamah is not only a future event, it is a mirror placed in front of us today. Because the one who truly believes in the day of judgment does not wait for that day to change. He changes now. He corrects himself now. He fears injustice now. And this is where leadership either becomes a source of light or a source of darkness. Because Islam does not judge leaders by how strong their control was, but by how just their control was. Not by how many feared them, but by how many were protected by them. And when I remind myself of Qiyamah, I am reminded that every oppressed soul has a record that never fades. Every tear has a witness. Every silent prayer has a destination. And no injustice ever disappears. It only waits. And this realization reshapes the meaning of strength. Because true strength is not the ability to crush opposition. It is the ability to restrain the ego, to choose fairness when revenge feels easier, to choose patience when anger demands action, And Islam teaches that authority is a test that exposes what already exists inside a person. It does not create character, it reveals it. And on Qiyamah, that revelation will be complete, with no filters, no defenses, no allies, only the truth standing naked before Allah. And when I imagine that day, I imagine leaders wishing they had listened more, spoken less, acted sooner, and feared Allah more than public opinion. Because public opinion cannot follow you into the grave, but your deeds will. And this understanding removes the illusion that time will fix injustice. Because Islam teaches that delayed justice in this world is compensated by perfect justice in the next. And that is why silence in the face of oppression is never neutral. It becomes a position that will be questioned. And this awareness forces me to ask myself again and again, did I use my voice to defend the weak or to protect comfort? Did I use my authority to lift burdens or to avoid responsibility? Did I remember Allah when decisions were made? Or did I remember consequences only when it was too late? And this is why Qiyamah does not paralyze the believer. It disciplines him. It does not make him fearful of action. It makes him careful with intention. Because Islam does not separate action from accountability, and it does not separate leadership from worship. And when people say the atmosphere changed, when they say the room went silent, it is because something eternal entered the space. Something that stripped away excuses and exposed priorities, reminding every heart that leadership is temporary but accountability is permanent, that this world rewards appearance but the next rewards sincerity, and that the greatest failure is not being opposed but being unjust. And I say all of this knowing that no leader is free from mistakes. But Islam does not demand perfection. It demands honesty, repentance, correction, and humility before Allah. And this is where hope lives, because Qiyamah is not only a day of judgment, it is also a day of mercy for those who tried sincerely, who admitted wrong, who corrected paths, who feared Allah even when no one was watching. And this balance between justice and mercy is what gives meaning to leadership, because a leader who remembers mercy will never become cruel, and a leader who remembers judgment will never become arrogant. And as I move forward, I carry this reminder not as a threat but as guidance, not as fear but as clarity. Because when the noise of the world fades, when praise and criticism disappear, when power loosens its grip, one truth remains standing, that every soul will return, every trust will be questioned, and every leader will stand as nothing more than a servant. And on that day I pray not to be defended by words but by deeds, not to be surrounded by followers but by sincerity, and not to be remembered for authority but for accountability. Because in the end, the real silence of Qiyamah is not the silence of fear, it is the silence of truth, finally speaking without interruption.